Evening all. Are you a millennial? Um, and you want to know more? People keep talking about various books, various films, various people, historical events, and you wish you knew more. It is often said about the millennial generation that they are the most unaware of the accomplishments of the generations that went before them. And I thought I'd come and share some of my knowledge and my recommendations to you, particularly if you're a millennial, and you want to know more about various things. It is said two things, two words I live by, two phrases I live by rather. One is that knowledge is power, and two, we stand on the shoulders of giants. So where we are today is because of all the great accomplishments of millennia of human achievement. So without further ado, I'm going to cover the first in what I hope is to be a series, the first installment, and this is about the films of Stanley Kubrick. Why is Stanley Kubrick an important filmmaker? People often reference him. If you read film magazines, periodicals, if you look at interviews with directors, they all cite Stanley Kubrick as a major influence. And what it is that Kubrick is a unique filmmaker. His filmmaking style, he's a very visual filmmaker. The imagery that you see in his films have become iconic. He frames a film like an artwork, um, and as such, he is very visually engaging that way. He has a very unique style. He developed a lot of new techniques of filmmaking during his career, and he has a particular way of directing actors that leads his films to have a kind of often emotional distance, but nonetheless still compelling. And the fact that he was working in time from the 1950s through to the 1990s, and he was doing films and covering topics and subjects that his contemporaries wouldn't go near. So his films are always worth checking out. It's fair to say that every single one of his films that he made is worth watching for one reason or another, even if all the ingredients don't quite gel. So, without further ado, I'm going to describe each one of his films and what makes it special. A bit of background on his life first. He was born in 1928 in New York. After leaving school, he became a photographer in magazines in New York, and he became very well known for being an excellent photographer with an eye for composition. His photographs were taken a very artistic aspect to them, almost like paintings on photographs. And he sometimes would do photo stories. So he was doing that, but then he became fascinated with filmmaking, so he started making short documentary pieces. And then after that, we're going to get to his first film, which is called Fear and Desire. It was made in 1953, and the setting is a fictitious war between two fictitious nations. It's very low budget, very rough. This is someone who hasn't quite learnt all the techniques, but still that eye for composition that he learned from being a stills photographer is very much present. Not so much in the exterior scenes when he's filming outdoors, that they look very rough, but he has very scenes in the interior. Particularly there's an interrogation scene that's classic Kubrick, very high contrast lighting, which means big difference between the bits that you can see that are lit up and the bits that are hidden in the shadow, creating a kind of very high contrast, but also very crisp cinematography. This is something that marks out Kubrick. His filming is always sharp, no matter whether he was working in black and white in the 1950s or much later on working in colour. The definition of film quality with Stanley Kubrick films are very marked. Even though they may have been made in the 1950s, they're so sharp and so realistically composed that they don't seem from a much earlier decade. They still contain freshness. Having said that, Fear and Desire is very rough around the film edges. It's dealing with kind of tough subjects based around warfare, the brutality of men in combat. There's rape, there's cold-blooded killing, there's interrogation bordering on torture. He's not shying away from the nasty aspects of war, but it's a very rough, very amateurish acting in it. Kubrick himself didn't like the film. He didn't like the finished product, and he tried to have all copies destroyed. He didn't succeed. You can still find copies, mainly on YouTube. I don't think it's ever been given a commercial DVD or video release, so you're going to have to dig it out on YouTube or on other video streaming sites, if and when you can. So a few years passed, and in 1955, he's given a chance to direct another film called Killer's Kiss. It comes in just under 70 minutes, so it's pretty much a short feature, or maybe like an extended TV episode. And it's film noir, so Kubrick is telling a story about a down-at-heel boxer who gets romantically involved in a crooked promoter's wife, and there's going to be crime, betrayal, passion, all this kind of things that you would associate with film noir. Again, it's very low budget, it's rough around the edges. Kubrick employed a guerrilla filmmaking style, which means he took the camera out and the actors out on real locations without seeking permission, without having streets closed off, and have his actors move around in the real streets of New York. And so anything that walks into the shot or anything's very naturalistic. The acting's pretty rough. It's a very stripped down story. There is an interesting dream sequence where the camera goes through streets of New York, and it's done in looks like a film negative, with lots of processed shots, and people have said that that's very reminiscent of what he would later do in 2001, A Space Odyssey. Now, the film wasn't a commercial success, but people realised that Kubrick's talent for filmmaking was there, and he was then given a bigger budget, better actors to work with on his next film. That next film is The Killing. And again, it's another film noir. In fact, it's Kubrick's take on, say, The Asphalt Jungle, the John Huston film from 1950. So he's even got Sterling Hayden, who was the lead actor in that film, as the lead actor in his film. So he's working with a better quality cast. He's got actual pros working on it, and this is his first real polished film, and it's an excellent one as well. It's an excellent sort of crime thriller from the 1950s. The quality of filmmaking is great. You get that sharpness. This is what marks it out from other film noir of the period. It's the quality of the cinematography. And it's well worth checking out. It wasn't a commercial success on its initial release, but Hollywood producers and critics acknowledged that it was a very good film, and they predicted that success would come from Kubrick from that film. In 1957, he's given a much larger budget, an A-list star to work with, and a choice of script, and he chooses to adapt a novel that he'd read, a World War I novel called Paths of Glory. And so he adapted that novel for the cinema. And this is the first big success of Kubrick's career. And it's one of the best World War I movies ever made. So the story is about a French infantry unit that is ordered into battle, even though the planning is haphazard. The task they have to do is too difficult. The forces provided are inadequate. The general in charge is doing this attack primarily for his own ego and status within the French army. And when it fails, there is a court case. So you have this amazing battle scene close to the beginning of the film, where Kubrick is using tracking. So he's using this tracking dollies to get this amazing shot of Kirk Douglas, who's the star, walking through a trench with the soldiers all kind of hunkered down, ready to go over the top. And it's amazing. And then the big, long tracking shots, they emerge from their trench and advance towards the Germans. This is groundbreaking cinema. It's a kind of cinema we will expect to see in bigger blockbusters in decades to come. But Kubrick here is doing it first, getting in, being groundbreaking with this. And then it becomes a courtroom drama. And I won't blow any spoilers because I think you need to watch it and be engaged with it. But it is a downer of a film. It's a World War I film. Of course it's going to be a downer. It was a big commercial success, and it showed that Kubrick had this ability to not just direct a film, but be involved in every aspect of its production, and down to adapting a story, down to casting choices, the way he frames shots, the way he uses movement of the camera. He had control. And this is the first time you really get to see Kubrick as the real deal, the finished product as a filmmaker. So in 1960, Kirk Douglas is producing his own film, Spartacus, which he is starring in. And he has creative differences with the director he originally hired, called Anthony Mann. Very well-established, successful filmmaker, but they have creative differences. Mann leaves the project, and Douglas, after working with Kubrick on Paths of Glory, hires Kubrick to direct Spartacus. Now, Spartacus is the most un-Kubrick film on the list, right? Don't get me wrong, it is a terrific film, and it's perhaps the most popcorn film of Kubrick's career. That's not to say it's dumbed down in any way. It's not dumbed down at all. But it feels more mainstream than Kubrick's other works. Even though there are some very violent battle scenes where you see people's arms getting hacked off. But overall, Spartacus is more mainstream. It's in the classic tradition of the ancient biblical epic. It stands alongside, say, the Ten Commandments, or Ben-Hur. It's in that league. Kubrick's working with not just one A-list actor, he's working with a massive cast. You've got Laurence Olivier, Tony Curtis, Peter Ustinov, Gene Simmons. These are all big names for the time. But Kubrick's working with a script he didn't write or adapt, and he's working with a cast he didn't choose, and he's working with a film crew not of his choosing. He's been parachuted into the project. So that's why you get this style. The film is very glossy as opposed to crisp, which is what most Kubrick films have, a kind of sharpness and crispness about the way they look. This is a very glossy film, and it's full of melodrama. It's working off a Dalton Trumbo script, and Trumbo is somebody who's very emotional as a scriptwriter. But nonetheless, Kubrick does add his own touches. I think one of the best bits is a scene earlier on where Spartacus is training to be a gladiator, and he's up against an opponent in the gladiatorial arena. And in the foreground, you have two politicians played by Peter Ustinov and Laurence Olivier, talking about all the intrigues in Rome, and this gladiatorial fight to the death is going on behind them, and they're oblivious, and Kubrick set up this really deep focus shot. Kubrick's really into this. It's kind of what's called depth of field. So you have action that's perfectly in focus in the foreground, and action in the foreground and then in the background, and both are absolutely clear and sharp, and you can watch it all. It's a technique pioneered by Orson Welles, and Kubrick is the inheritor of the Wellesian tradition. Anyway, Spartacus was a massive hit, but Kubrick was very unhappy that he didn't have control over the production, and this will mark the rest of his career. 1961, Kubrick, who is growing disenchanted with American life, and he has a fear of flying, relocates to the United Kingdom, where he spends the rest of his life becoming a naturalised British citizen. In 1962, He adapts Vladimir Nabokov's novel Lolita into a film. And Lolita is a very controversial novel because it deals with a middle-aged man developing a sexual obsession over a young girl in her early teens, and it violates all kinds of taboos. For this film, they changed the character. In the novel, she's 12. In the film, she's 14. It's still dodgy territory. But Kubrick handles it about as well as any filmmaker could without it ever really getting tawdry. So it's uncomfortable, the subject matter, but it never becomes exploitative or tawdry. It stars James Mason on top form as Humbert Humbert, and Peter Sellers playing essentially multiple parts in the film, which Kubrick brings out Sellers' talent for multiple parts and dark humour. And from that point of view, it's really good. It's not a favourite, it's perhaps my least favourite Kubrick film, but that's possibly because I'm just not buying into the central premise. It's not a central premise I want to be part of, and I don't like Humbert Humbert, so it leaves me a bit cold, but it's still worth checking out if you're a Kubrick completionist. If you want to see what the fuss about the Nabokov's novel was about, yeah, go ahead, watch it. But I think Lolita is the springboard for the rest of Kubrick's career. Mid to late 1963, Kubrick then begins work on perhaps one of his most iconic films. If you had to pick a top 3 Kubrick films of all time, you'd put Dr. Strangelove in there. So this is again a dark comedy, but this time it's about nuclear war. So everybody kind of knows the story that a mad American Air Force general launches an all-out nuclear strike with B-52 bombers on the Soviet Union, and the whole film is the crisis management that emerges from that. It stars Peter Sellers. He famously plays 3 roles in it. One is a kind of very mild-mannered, limp American president, always on the phone, having these imaginary conversations with his Soviet counterpart, where he's using very facile platitudes to try and calm the Soviet president down because his country is about to be obliterated. His second role is my favourite in the film, which is Group Captain Mandrake, a very urbane and rational RAF officer who has to deal with the insane general that launched the attack. The insane general played excellently by Sterling Hayden. And the third one is the eponymous Dr. Strangelove himself, a former Nazi scientist who is now working for the Americans and who has uncontrollable hand gestures and these nervous spasms, which makes him do Nazi salutes. And he keeps accidentally referring to the President of the United States as Mein Führer. That's his broadest comedic role. Fantastic supporting cast, including George C. Scott as another American general, and making his film debut, the American cowboy character actor Slim Pickens as a B-52 pilot. He absolutely steals the film. Fantastic cinematography, amazing sets done by Ken Adam, who did the James Bond films. It is a masterpiece of dark humour, great quotable zinger lines, definitely a must-see Kubrick film. After Dr. Strangelove was released in 1964, Kubrick then immediately goes to work on his magnum opus, which is 2001, A Space Odyssey. He teams up with the British science fiction writer and scientist Arthur C. Clarke. They write a screenplay, and then Kubrick goes into making perhaps the most complex film of his career, the most complex film made up until the 1960s. In terms of visual look, this is absolutely groundbreaking. The quality of the cinematography is just second to none. You have to pinch yourself to think that some of these scenes, they began filming in December 1965, and through most of 1966 into the first part of 1967, they're making this film. The quality of the film is up there. It has not dated. It just looks absolutely amazing, crisp, sharp. It's unlike any other film made at the same time. And there was a lot of time spent with the special effects because, again, this film broke the mold in special effects. It invented whole new techniques, whole new ways of filmmaking, making models, doing matte shots, sort of the use of very clever but simple techniques to achieve the look of zero gravity. It's just an absolutely stunning film to look at. I would argue that it's a better film to look at than Star Wars. But where people have problems with is the story, because it is so packed with metaphor, subtext. It's open to interpretation from the viewer. And it's a film that's not in a hurry to get anywhere in terms of plot. It's a long film. It feels like a long film. There are whole sequences where very little happens. Kubrick is allowing something like a spacewalk to just go along in its entirety. Very long shots of spaceships moving. But at the same time, it has a fantastic use of classical music. This is a phase Kubrick enters into where he uses classical music to complement the action rather than have something that was purposely written for the film. It's another string to Kubrick's bow. The characters in 2001 aren't particularly involving, but they are realistic. These are scientists, engineers, astronauts, who are very professional, a matter of fact. They don't get emotional, they don't lose their cool or control, but at the same time, it does distance you as a viewer. But having said that, this is a must film see to watch and to take your own interpretation into it. Even if you come away feeling like you didn't get any of it, or you found it too slow, or too non-engaging, doesn't matter. It's a film that's definitely worth checking out because you can see the influences down the line. If you watch a film like Gravity, for example, you will get the references to 2001: A Space Odyssey.